Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. Ruth is a visiting professor at a large university in Ireland, and Claire is an associate professor at a primarily undergraduate university in Northern California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Claire, and today we're talking about some things that I've learned from Sabbatical so far. But first, Ruth, how was your week?
My week was great. This is a weird one, but I had a medical test yesterday.
Okay.
And I had to you have to be knocked out for it.
Oh.
And it was kind of weird. It's really strange that I felt like I went on a little holiday because you're always stressed and I should be doing this and I should be putting on laundry if I'm not worried. And I was just like, today is a write-off. I literally cannot do anything. They're going to give me sleeping medicine and then afterwards they wake you up and give you tea and toast. And I just came home and was like, I'm going to go and get into bed and read. And it was sort of liberating to not be able to do anything. And so just being like, okay, that's what's happening today.
Wow.
So yeah, but I think there's something kind of messed up about my life. That was oh, what a relaxing, that was such a fun day that I had. So anyway, that was weird. But how was your week?
It reminds me of that phenomena where you're not trying to take a break, you're not trying to relax, you're trying to do other things, but you're, anyway, just actually being like, oh, I am going to get in bed and have some tea now is so much more relaxing than accidentally not getting anything done and having some tea while you're thinking about doing laundry or whatever.
Right, and I wish I could just parcel off bits of time and be like, and I think this is a little bit the downside of some mostly working from home at the moment,
yes,
where
that's a toughie.
There is this you can't do laundry or make a soup or whatever when you're in the office. So you know what I mean? So I think there is something liberating sometimes in sort of ring fencing time and being this is for this. So anyway, maybe I will do that without having to be knocked out. So yeah, maybe I should try that instead. So,
well, I'm glad you feel like you had a mini vacation and that you got this reminder that maybe you could block out some time when you're not doing medical tests.
Medically necessary. Totally. But tell me, how was your day or week?
Sorry, my week was good. One thing that I've been doing a lot on Sabbatical is going to coffee shops and working in coffee shops. And one of the things I like about it is it does kind of block out a little time. I am going to the coffee shop to do X. And so I'm only bringing stuff to do X, and I've decided I'm doing X while I'm there. Anyway, one of the things I've been working on in coffee shops that's been wonderful is I've been working on my new novel. And I say new because I've worked on other novels in the past, not because I've finished other novels in the past. But this one is going great, and I'm really excited about it. And one thing that was new and exciting that I've never had happen before while working on novels is the characters just kind of took off. I was like, I don't really know what this next scene is, but the characters knew what the next scene was. And they were like, this is what I would do. And I was like, okay, great. We'll just have you do that. So that was pretty exciting.
Okay, I just want to pick up on your little caveat that you're like, oh, they never finished. You've written more novel than I've ever written. You know what I mean? So you don't ever, to me, you are the most accomplished author ever. And I'm sorry, that's probably stressful, but you don't need to put in the caveat. It's fine.
Thank you, Ruth.
I'm not going to be like, wait a minute, did you win a Booker Award? Because then if not, what do you say? So anyway, that sounds so cool.
Yeah,
that sounds very rich.
I've been really, rich. I think that's a good word. Yeah. So that's been really exciting.
I'm excited to hear more about the novel.
Yes, me too. I'll keep reporting in.
Yes. But before we do that, so do you have a quote for us?
I do. So this quote is from Greg McKeown, who wrote Essentialism, which we've referred to a bunch on this podcast. And I guess I'm on an email list where he sends out little tidbits of information and this one stood out to me. So here we go. Research demonstrates that when people feel heard and understood, they become less argumentative and are more open to incorporating different points of view. They also tend to understand their ideas better and can communicate them more clearly. But none of this happens when our first objective is something other than trying to understand what the other person is saying. Listening to agree or disagree is our default, so it takes a concerted effort to shift our mindset to this new way of listening. So I just really liked that. Listening to understand, and to agree or disagree is not trying to understand. And that's really interesting.
I feel like I just don't do that. And I wish I did. Do you know what I mean? As soon as I'm like, yeah, no, I don't do that. Even with the kids, you're just like, okay, but in my head I'm like, here's all the reasons this is wrong. You know what I mean? It's like, instead of like, yeah, I know that is what you want or whatever. So yeah, that's a really good, thank you. That's a good reminder.
And even listening to agree, like I do that a lot where I'm just planning to agree. Yeah. But that's not actually helpful in understanding or moving things forward either. So yeah, good reminder.
I feel like I just slow everything down, because that's what that feels like to me. Is slowing things down and really trying to understand. So yeah, I love it. So this week we're talking about you, and we're talking about your sabbatical. So yeah, so can we? Okay, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
Can we start by kind of defining what is a sabbatical, or what is it anyway for you, and where you're coming from? Okay. So I feel like it's a word that I often heard when I was younger, and I really had no idea what it meant. Totally.
And I do think people use it to mean different things. So in academia, in tenure-line positions, usually there's a sabbatical that you can apply for every 7 years or so. And then you take a semester or a year away from your normal obligations to focus in on other things. Kind of shake it up, figure out what you want to work on. And the idea is that you're bringing something back to the university. So like when I applied for my sabbatical, the entire application was, what's the benefit to the university going to be of you going off and doing this sabbatical? And, a lot of what I said was, well, I'm going to be doing this research cruise, and we're going to be collaborating with a bunch of people, and we'll be bringing our university's name to that collaboration, and all the papers that come out of that collaboration will have our name on it, and all the students that I work with on this collaboration will be benefiting from that, and they're at our university. So that kind of thing, explaining the benefit to the university of going off and doing whatever it is you're doing. And then I see it as a really important time for thinking about what projects I actually do want to work on, and getting out of ruts and thinking about new things and figuring out the directions that I want to pursue going forward. And I think it's a really valuable thing. I would advocate for it to be in many, many lines of work. I think it's really cool and useful to everybody.
Totally. And it's the kind of thing that you hear about, like when you're doing your PhD and you're like, well, must be nice for some, and but then after you've been teaching, you're like, oh no, it seems medically necessary. Like you would need, but even just to kind of have that pause and refresh and just kind of let stuff percolate or whatever. So can you specify then, is it, so it's only after you get tenure that you're allowed to do sabbatical?
Usually the tenure clock resets every 7 years, and you usually apply for tenure around the same time. So the way it works at our university, at least, is the first semester you got tenure could be your first semester on sabbatical if you planned it that way. But if you don't take, if you're eligible for sabbatical and you don't take it, you're still eligible the next year. And you coordinate with the department too to make sure that somebody will be able to teach the classes that you normally teach.
You can't have 10 people go on sabbatical.
Yeah, it'd be tricky, or at least we'd have to hire some people to fill the gap.
Yeah, and I know there's different flavors, and maybe this is something we'll talk about another time, because there's other like dip year and like, so what's the main distinguishing? Okay, so you did specify this, or you were talking about this a minute ago, but how do you apply? Okay. And then how is it decided?
Sure.
So like you said, like you become eligible, and then what?
Yeah, so you apply, at least at our university, there's just a form you fill out. It's just a couple pages. You have a proposal for what you plan to do. And again, the only thing, from my understanding, that you really need to hit is what are the benefits to the university of whatever it is you're planning to do. So you explain what you're planning to do. You want to, of course, like normal proposals, show that you can do it, that you have the resources to do it, that it will, I don't know, that it's useful to you, it's useful to the university, that it can be done, all those kind of things. Like it'd be silly if you said, oh, I'm going to write a paper a week or something like that, is in the not doable kind of category, and they'd ask you to revise it. But if you said,
you're like, I'm going to catch up on reality TV.
Right, sure, that doesn't really bring benefit to the university, right. So then you apply, it goes through a couple stages of review, you get approved. You can apply for 1 semester or a year. The way it works at our university, and I've heard a couple other ones, you get paid for a semester, whether you take a semester or a year. So I'm on half pay from the university for a year. Okay. But you can supplement that with pay from grants or something like that. Right. So we're doing that as well. And then you mentioned the other kind of leave that we have it's a DIP leave. It's called difference in pay. And so you can do that every 5 years instead of every 7 years. So the DIP clock resets and then you're eligible after 5 years, whereas the sabbatical, when you take a sabbatical or a DIP, both clocks reset. And then 5 years later, you're eligible for a DIP. 7 years later, sabbatical. The DIP is difference in pay between the pay that they'd give you and the pay that they would give the cheapest replacement to cover your classes. And so when you're early on, that you're getting less pay if you do a DIP. But at some point, if you get, high enough up on the salary scale, the difference in pay is actually the same, or maybe you get more money than if you did a sabbatical, just based on the difference in pay. So anyway, that's the background on that.
Okay. And then before we get into your particular sabbatical, I was wondering, you remember when we were applying for tenure and there was all these myths? We were always like, oh my God, did you hear about, and it was never, what if you don't submit it? Or if you, left out a comma, then you were going to get fired, or whatever this stuff was. Is there stuff like that about sabbatical? Is there, if you don't do everything they say, you're going to get, and also, how do you gauge what to say you're going to do, right? Because, you're saying, if you said do a paper a week, it would be ridiculous. But you know what I mean? And then because just as a thing, because this is something, because, when I was going to go to Ireland for a year, I was like, oh, is this an option? But you do have to come back for at least 18 months afterwards, or else you have to pay back your salary. So that, I guess, is not a myth, it's a truth. But did you have any things you were like, oh no, or worried about, or that kind of...
Sure. Well, yeah. So let's first talk about, you said, you need to come back or you don't get paid, because the whole point again is to bring benefit back to the university. Totally. And so if you aren't coming back, and I think it's the way that I remembered hearing it was, if you took a year on sabbatical, then you need to be back for a year, or if you took a semester on sabbatical, you need to be back for a semester. But the idea is you're at least in order to, not have to negate that sabbatical contract and pay back what you've been paid. Yeah. Because that hopefully will give you enough time to bring that benefit back that you said you were going to bring back. As far as rumors, I feel like I heard less rumors about the sabbatical application process because I think it's less fraught. Everybody's so worried about tenure. There's so many rumors flying around. I just asked a few people that I knew that had gotten sabbaticals and said, hey, can you send me your sabbatical proposals? And do you have any tips? And the general feedback I got was, hey, you're contractually obligated to have this sabbatical. So the only reason it's not that they won't give it to you. The only reasons they wouldn't is if your proposal was completely unreasonable for some reason, and then they would just say revise it and do it next year. Or if for some reason the department really and truly could not spare you this year, again they can't delay it forever, but they could say, hey, we can't have both analytical chemists go at the same time. Will you go next year? Or something like that. Now that neither of those were an issue for me, and I think it's kind of unusual for them to be an issue. So I just asked the chair of my department, who I knew had gone on sabbaticals successfully, and several other people, and they, I generally got reassured that it wasn't an issue. I also heard that generally, one of the rumors that you hear, which I think is true, is that it's a little bit more competitive to go for the semester-long sabbaticals than the year-long sabbaticals, just because... the year-long sabbaticals, the university is actually saving money if you go on sabbatical for a year, because they're just paying you half. So you're contractually obligated. It's not a big cost. Unless there's some issue, why would they not let you go? Whereas the semester one, they're going to have to hire a replacement. They're still paying you full time. They might only be able to give so many of those this year. And so then you start to get a little bit more competitive with the other applicants.
Is it harder to get someone to move to where we lived for a semester than a year?
To move to Humboldt? That's a good question. I mean, it is rural and all that, so that could be part of it. Yeah.
So is there a finite number of sabbaticals? How do they gauge that? Do you know? Or is it if you put in a reasonable application, it's going to happen? Yeah,
I got the impression that it's not an issue for the. Yeah, I think that there might be a limit on how many one semester long sabbaticals they can offer, just because it does cost more money. But the year long ones, I was told it was non-competitive. It's just a matter of whether your proposal is decent and we can spare you, then great, go for it, Okay, and then tell me about you. So have you... Yeah, because it's
there's stuff that you wrote down in the sabbatical, and then there's obviously just like, what do you want to get out of it?
Yeah, great question. I want to figure out what I want to do. I want to have the freedom to spend a lot of time thinking and redirecting and getting out of ruts and being intentional about what I want to do next. Yeah. So I have like a couple things that, like, lessons learned kind of things.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Should I just jump into one of those?
Yeah, for sure. Or do you want to tell us really briefly? So you said what your plans were, what you hoped, and so you had like kind of research plans, and then you kind of had like personal life plans. So yeah, tell us what you've learned on those fronts.
Yeah, so it's all kind of integrated, right? Well, so we've been in Los Angeles. All my research plans have pretty much been, I can be anywhere working on them because I'm working on data, I'm working on concepts, I'm working on proposals. A big research thing that I'm doing this on sabbatical is this research cruise that's going to be 2 weeks at sea, very collaborative, lots of scientists. And so a lot of what I've been doing is getting ready for that, planning for that, trying to make that go smoothly. So that's the big thing where I have to be in a particular place at a particular time. But other than that, it's been very flexible. We can be where we want to be. We can be working on what we want to work on wherever that is. So Ralph and I are in Los Angeles right now, and I've been going to a lot of coffee shops, as I said. And the first thing that I just wanted to highlight that I've learned is I was hanging out in the coffee shop the other day working on my novel when the characters were telling me what they were doing. And I was watching the student-aged people working at the coffee shop, and they were just so professional and working well together and working well with the customers and having fun. And I was thinking, wow, this is how I want my lab group to be. And I was thinking, so I guess one of my reminders is I love working with students and I love teaching, and just seeing those student-age people doing things well reminded me of that. And it reminded me that I love to work with students and help them learn. I love to try to make my classroom dynamic how I want it. I love to empower the students to do their best and help each other. I love the being on the stage and thinking about how to make the best performance in the classroom. So just this reminder from taking a step away from it that I really do love working with students and teaching has been really nice.
Which is so not clear when you're in the trenches, is it? You know what I mean?
It's easy to forget.
Like, these emails and like whatever. And it's true, like what you're saying, like students are so great, and like, and you do achieve those things. You make a lovely atmosphere in your class. You have a great research group. But that's so cool to see that in a different setting and recognize that's the dynamic you're looking for. I love that.
Yeah. So that was really cool.
Yeah,
and then
I love that.
The next thing I want to tell you, so I have two more things, is so coming to, well, let's talk about overwhelm and this concept of overwhelm. And so just to define terms first, when I'm thinking of overwhelm, I'm thinking of this need to do 5 things today, but I maybe don't even have time to do one of them, and I should have already been done with these ones, and I just feel behind, and I don't have the time to do any of the things that I feel like I need to do. I could have sworn to you that if I took away a bunch of the things that were on my to-do list, a bunch of the obligations, a bunch of the schedules, the overwhelm would go down. But the sabbatical has been a perfect test of that. Everything I could possibly want to take off my schedule to reduce overwhelm has been removed from my schedule. I don't have any teaching. I have virtually no meetings. I have no deadlines for months and months and months. I have just a few big projects that I specifically chose to work on, and my overwhelm feelings were exactly the same. No change, exactly the same.
Dude, this is mind-blowing. And it's like, as soon as you say it, I'm like, yes, I'm sure. Like, that actually totally feels, do you know what I mean? But that's so, because that's the fantasy land, right? And the magical thinking, like, if these things were just gone, I'd be fine. But then your brain is still there.
It's the same.
You know.
So the only conclusion that I can draw is that overwhelm is actually a state of mind. And that's a really hard concept, because it really feels like it has to do with all the things and all the calendar and the to-do list. But having removed all those and seeing that it's the same, I don't think it has to do with the things or the calendar or the to-do list, and therefore the answer can't be found there. Now, I don't know what the answer is.
This is intense. This is like the book you should go write.
Ooh.
You know what I mean?
I
because
do like to write.
But this is so interesting, right? Because if it is the stuff, then there can be a magic trick, right? There can be the thing, and there can be the filing system or the calendar or whatever it is. But what if it's just you and you just have to get comfortable with, you know what I mean? Or like, all right, I feel this way and I still proceed anyway, or whatever the magic is. I don't know. But that's so interesting. I said magic there and I didn't mean it, because I'm like saying we should not be doing the magical thinking of, oh, if I just get a post-it system, then everything's going to be just fine.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
The answer, I'm not saying there isn't an answer. I'm saying it's not in the post-it system. It's not in the calendar scheduling. I think, I'm not sure where it is. We need to work on that part of my book first. But I think it has something to do with being in the moment more often, doing one thing at a time more often, that kind of thing. But I feel pretty confident from doing this test. I didn't even know I was doing this test, but it was a pretty perfect test. That it's not, the answer's not to be found in the to-do list or the calendar or the scheduling or the post-its. It's not actually about the things. It's this.
See, I think you actually have. I think you're more than halfway through, because I think just the overwhelm and just the fact that will exist,
right?
And that's what you have to kind of get comfortable with and sit with and stuff. That's revolutionary right there.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of inconceivable to me that I would feel overwhelmed in a situation where I just had a few projects that I had chosen to work on with no impending deadlines and no schedule. How could that even be? But it was the exact same feelings. So it's not. It has nothing to do with those things. Yeah.
That's,
so it's all. Yeah.
Okay.
Gotta choose what you're doing one thing at a time. That's been helping. That's been more effective than scrapping my entire calendar.
Wow. Well, this is like, okay, sorry, I'm just like, you've blown my mind, but it's like, so we're coming up on Christmas is a big holiday in Ireland for a lot of people, and it's very intense, and there's a lot of, and you're kind of like, oh, just do the nice things. But the kids are like, we're going to do this thing, right? We're going to do the same thing we did last year, but this year. I'm like, okay. But I'm so overwhelmed. Like, there's a Christmas tree sitting downstairs and it's not got any decorations on it yet. And I feel really overwhelmed about it. You know what I mean? But I'm like, I'm bringing that overwhelmed brain from work into like personal life stuff as well. And okay, I think I need to sit with this. This is very interesting. Yeah. Okay, good. This is huge then.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is huge. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Say more. Tell us more.
Okay. So then the last lesson I have prepared for you guys is, so you remember when we were applying for tenure? I'm sure you remember.
That time, the fun time we had applying for tenure, yes.
The teaching part of our tenure applications, at least in our departments, I felt was very liberating. The impression I got was reflect on your teaching, do things to try to improve, reflect on that, and that will show that you are working hard and doing well at teaching. But there wasn't any obligation to do anything in particular. You didn't have to, if you got some bad teaching evaluations, you should reflect on that. But there was no like direction, like you must be working towards this or that. It was like you choose how you want to improve your class and what problems you want to try to solve in your class and how you want to try to solve them, and tell us about it. And it was very open, and I felt very supported in trying whatever I wanted. Like, I had to be reflecting and trying things. That was good. But it was very open about what things and what directions I wanted to go. And I really liked that. So what I'm learning is to pursue what I want to do and to not feel obligated to do what I thought was a good idea when I wrote my to-do list or when I wrote my sabbatical proposal or even my NSF proposal. I'm not saying throw the proposals out the window, but I'm saying that I maybe felt overly tied to the particular things I said I was going to work on in those things. Like, for example, I was thinking recently about the classes I'm going to teach next year, and that I want to make a cool new kind of homework assignment for them. And I was like, oh, but I didn't put that in my sabbatical proposal. And no, one of the main points of sabbatical is shaking things up so I can think about new things. So why should I chain myself to ideas I had about what I do in my sabbatical before my sabbatical? It just doesn't make sense. So the lesson is to give myself the same gift of freedom of pursuits that we got in the teaching part of our tenure file, just all the time, in sabbatical and beyond. I'm sure that all these funding sources have the same goal of moving things forward. And if you are discovering as you're going about it, oh, we actually want to go this slightly different direction, that's great, So I was feeling overly chained to the very particulars of what I said I was going to do, either in a proposal or just on my to-do list. Forget that. Just do the thing that feels like the right pursuit. That's my lesson.
That's so interesting, because I feel like that's something I tell students. Like if they were going to go and do a PhD project, and I'm always like, it doesn't really matter what you start out with, honestly. Like you'll direct it in the way you want it to go, and you'll find things that are interesting, and chances are what you'll end up with at the end really isn't going to be what you started out with. You know what I mean? And I know that, but then like you said, like I don't apply it to myself at all. And like, yeah, I think trusting yourself and that if you are finding yourself drawn to different pathways, then that's the right pathway.
Yeah, I mean, it was so effective in the tenure guidelines just being so open of reflect and try to improve and reflect and try things. That was really effective, and so I want to apply that more broadly.
I love it.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah,
and tell me this too. Like, So how are you kind of structuring, like, are you following the semester?
No.
Do you know what I mean? In terms of, okay, I'm doing these projects that I want to do. Like, because during the summer, like, did you start, you know what I mean? Like, are you like, okay, well, it's day one of my sabbatical, or are you taking it, because your sabbatical is like 2 semesters really, but are you holding yourself to, okay, but I'm working in the summer, or how are you kind of approaching all of this with
Sure.
breaks?
I mean, yeah, I feel like it's not going by semesters at all. So Ralph and I were going to leave town shortly after the semester ended, but I had a bunch of research that needed to be done on campus. We had some samples to process, we had some samples to collect, and then I also had to, get the lab kind of shut down for the year. So I guess what I'm getting at is right when the semester ended in May, we were like, my student and I were full-time in the lab, getting stuff done, troubleshooting issues with the method so that we could run a bunch of samples, boom, boom, boom. And then, so I did a lot of in the lab or in the field research right after the semester ended. And then we went to a conference. This is still in July. And then we spent some time in Atlanta. Now we've spent some time in LA. And so at that point, it became more, now I'm not doing anything at a particular time. I'm just working on whatever projects I'm working on. But I feel like we broke from the semester plan straight away because of the fact that some research needed to be done in the summer because it was very localized and had to be done still at the university. And then we had this conference that was at a particular time. And then we're still in the summer, but we've kind of entered a new phase of sabbatical where timing is flexible. And I'm still in that phase right now, but then that phase is going to end in May when my research cruise happens. So I guess, and I've kind of gone back and forth. I mean, Ralph and I have even thrown out days of the week, and we're like, who cares what day of the week it is? We're just doing sabbatical mode, any day. It doesn't really matter whether it's a Saturday or a Tuesday because we are doing our projects as much as we want to each day. So, no, I feel like I've totally thrown the semesters out. And, so in my sabbatical proposal, when I wrote what I was going to do, I did have a little timeline just to show that it was reasonable. And I'm sure I did say, I'll do this in this semester and that in that semester, but I really haven't consulted it. And I'm not worried about when things are happening.
So here you are at the halfway point.
Halfway point.
Yeah. So are you going to kind of keeping going with what you were doing? You feel like, or are you going to change it up? I mean, you're kind of changing it up, right? Like location wise. So
yeah, good point. Else? Yeah. So we're finished with our time in LA. Well, we're almost finished. We have another few weeks. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've slowly been, we've had several months now of the schedule being loose, and I feel like that's been incredibly valuable for me for figuring out what schedule works for me, what I need to be productive and happy on a daily basis. And I feel like I'm still figuring that out. So I'm sure I'll have totally different lessons for everybody at the end of the full year of the sabbatical. But yeah, I guess I don't want to even say whether I'm going to keep doing the same thing or not, because I'm going with the flow of what feels like it's working. And when things feel like they're not working, I change them up. And I couldn't tell you whether the things that are working right now are going to work 2 months from now. But I'll keep learning and figuring out what works for. One thing I learned that I really like is having good lighting. And I did not know that was important, but I keep seeking out places with good lighting to work in and to just be. And I had no idea. But now I'm like, wow, good lighting is very important. So
That's
anyway,
awesome.
Things like that. I feel like I'm...
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're committing to not committing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
exactly.
So I think that's awesome. So yeah, it's so interesting. And I think it is really true what you're saying. Like, and it's something about academia that I think is so, I really appreciate about academia. And even with the whole tenure process and all that, the idea that you're really developing this person over a very long period of time. Mm-hmm. And the sabbatical feels like a really important part of that. But mm-hmm. you're right, like it's a shame that so many more disciplines don't have it. Mm-hmm. Because I think it like only can be a good thing mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. for people to do that. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree completely.
I'm excited to hear how the second half goes. Thanks so much, Claire.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.